Hey folks, this is Nate Orshan from Kitchen My Lovely Home here in South Frankfurt. And this is a special sneak preview of tomorrow, September 21st, Moscow Mitch Monday show. So tomorrow is a very special show for a lot of reasons. And I'll back up and say, if you didn't know, we had this live cast, our sort of online protest here at the Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee every week on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, put that in your calendars. But odds are, if you're seeing this right now, you may already be a loyal listener. And if so, thank you. But anyway, tomorrow is going to be the Monday, the 21st is going to be a very special show. Obviously, as you know now, Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away. And as you know, the senator that we are dedicated to defeating in November has vowed that he will take a vote for a Trump nominee uh, in complete contradiction to his attitude and excuse back in 2016 for not allowing Judge Merrick Garland to get a Senate vote. So while a lot of the country is sort of mobilizing in response to that, we're going to take some time and sort of take a look back at some great moments from Ruth Bader Ginsburg's judicial career, especially on the Supreme Court, and why she was such an important justice, and many levels, not the least of which is sort of her stalwart defense of feminism and throughout her life, but especially on the Supreme Court. She was a dependable voice for progressive issues, especially as pertains to things like feminism. So um, she casts a long shadow, and we've got a special 25-minute clip of some highlights from her life coming up. So don't go away. But before that, let me just say that in addition to taking a look back at RBG's life, we're also going to have special guests. Oh, there's my dog in the background. This is how you know that this is not a professional setup here. We're going to have amazing cartoonist Mark Murphy. He's also a lawyer. He has a very interesting backstory too, and hopefully we'll get to some of that too. But the way that most Kentuckians know him is these amazing political cartoons that he keeps coming out with, and he has his own sort of style, which is great when you're a political cartoonist to sort of have, that's got to be a Mark Murphy cartoon. You can sort of tell when you see one of his stuff. And a lot of his work has graced things like billboards against Mitch. He illustrated Matt Jones's book, Mitch Please, which, as you know, we borrowed that title to create our own song, Mitch Please, from. But if you see that book next time you're at your independent bookstore, uh, check out the cover, because that wonderful sort of caricature of Mitch McConnell came from our guest tomorrow, Mark Murphy. So that's the kind of stuff he does, and he's also, just on top of that, he's also a really great speaker. Unlike me, I'm just blathering on and on and on. But if you ever get a chance to see Mark, if you hear that he's talking anywhere, please, run, don't walk to go see him, because he is eloquent. He is smart. The smartest guy in the room usually, and just a really remarkable Kentuckian. We're so lucky to have him. So come back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Monday the 21st for Moscow Mitch Monday, and you'll get to see Mark Murphy. You'll get to see a lot of other great stuff too, including our weekly Following Mitch Money feature from our own Doug Price. And Doug happens to be here with me right now. So why don't we turn it over to you, Doug, and you can give the folks a little preview of what they're going to get tomorrow.
Sure, Nate. I appreciate you turning it over to me. I'm excited about this segment. Last week, I became fixated on 6 degrees of separation, thinking about Mitch and being probably 1 or 2 degrees of separation from those people who have money, and tying all that together. And so this week, I'm going to be talking about the McConnell Center, which is located on the campus of University of Louisville, and looking at donations that have been made to the McConnell Center, along with donations made by similar donors to Mitch, and kind of tying all that together. So I hope you find it interesting. I enjoy doing this. I get to do a lot of research, and it's fun. So we hope you join us on that tomorrow. Oh yeah, I was on the rally we had on Saturday. I happened to be interviewed by a reporter from Channel 36, and they asked me several questions. Some of the questions I wish they had mentioned on the air, they didn't, but they did ask me about Mitch and his tweet that came out about an hour and 15 minutes after RBG had died. And in that tweet, he expressed sorrow for the loss of her life and then followed up with, and oh, by the way, we are going to nominate a new Supreme Court nominee. And I was asked how I felt about that. And I just said I thought that was very, very disrespectful. There's really not a whole lot else you can say about that.
Thank you so much, Doug. I can't wait for that. And it sounds like there's actually a mathematical relationship between the amount of money you have and your degree of closeness to Mr. Mitch McConnell, Senator Mitch McConnell. But I know you're going to go into that in some detail tomorrow, so that'll be a great thing. And thanks for the heads up about that Channel 36 interview. I can't wait to go see that one too, even if they didn't, get every single picture question that you asked. So that's another reason to tune in tomorrow, folks. Monday the 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. And here's another. So we have this long 25-minute compilation of clips pertaining to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And we hope that this will put you in a somber, reflective, and I feel like rededicating myself to defeating Mitch McConnell mood, as you do all the time. So let's take it away with the clip.
All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks. When there were 9, for most of the country's history, they were all white men.
I am grateful beyond measure for the confidence you have placed in me, and I will strive with all that I have to live up to your expectations in making this appointment. I spoke about the C-SPAN interview with me, and I thought how unfortunate it was that they couldn't have, because we didn't allow it at the time, television of the proceeding itself.
Right.
My view on that is I don't see any problem with having proceedings televised. I think it would be good for the public.
I do too.
We have open hearings. The concern, as I think I may have mentioned, is that it's the television, if it's gavel to gavel, we've come a long way from the days of the Shepard case when the camera was very intrusive and there were all kinds of equipment that could be distracting. The concern is about distortion because of the editing, if the editing is not controlled.
I understand. That's good enough for me. I would be concerned about the editing that goes on too. You're saying gavel to gavel, you're for.
Sometimes it helps to be a little deaf. and with that, she handed me a package of Max earplugs that I use to this day. It turned out to be wonderful advice, not simply for dealing with my spouse, but with my colleagues on law faculties and now on the court as well. It helps sometimes to be a little deaf. In the ancient days when I was going to college, the law was not a welcoming profession for women. In those days in the Southern District, most judges wouldn't hire women. In the U.S. Attorney's Office, women were strictly forbidden in the criminal division. There was one woman in the civil division. And the excuse for not hiring women in the criminal division was they have to deal with all these tough types, and women aren't up to that. And I was amazed. I said, have you seen the lawyers at Legal Aid who are representing these tough types? They are women. People ask me sometimes, when do you think it will be enough? When will there be enough women on the court? And my answer is, when there are 9. If I had any talent in the world, any talent that God could give me, I would be a great diva.
In the 70s, when I was at Columbia and writing briefs about distinctions based on sex and writing articles and speeches, I had a secretary. And she said, I've been typing this word sex, 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 and let me tell you, the audience that you're addressing, the men that you are addressing, and they were all men in the appellate courts in those days, the first association of that word is not what you're talking about. So I suggest that you use a grammar book term, use the word gender. It will ward off distracting associations.
When you're confirmed and you sit on the Supreme Court, when and how do you determine whether to lead or to follow societal changes?
I'll give you the answers that I attempted to give in that Madison lecture. I quoted from a law professor who said that the rationale for that decision and the ones that followed it, the one person, one vote line of decisions, was that when political avenues become dead-end streets, judicial intervention in the politics of the people may be essential in order to have effective politics.
Would you agree that judges need to exercise self-restraint and not endeavor to reform society? Isn't that a task better left to the political branches?
The courts hear only such controversies as the Constitution and the laws provide that courts shall hear. Courts may not hear cases for which the Constitution does not provide, for which legislation does not provide, but when the laws do provide for controversies of a judiciary nature, the judges must decide them. They have no choice. Our strategy was the soul of simplicity. It was to go after the stereotypes that were written into law. Like, the first case I argued here was Frontiero v. Richardson. She is a lieutenant in the Air Force. She gets no housing allowance for being a married officer, and her husband doesn't have access to the base medical and dental facilities. It was an afternoon argument. I didn't eat lunch because I was afraid I wouldn't retain it. When I got to the podium, I was at first terribly nervous, and then looked up at the justices and thought to myself, these are the most important judges in the United States, and they have to listen to me.
Sex, like race, has been made the basis for unjustified, or at least unproved assumptions concerning an individual's potential to perform or to contribute to society. These distinctions have a common effect. They help keep woman in her place, a place inferior to that occupied by men in our society.
Her mother was incensed that her daughter was subject to such humiliation, so she sued the school district for damages and also for an order that you must never do this again. To some of my colleagues, well, there was even a remark from the bench. The boys and 13-year-old boys, they go to the locker room, they're not wearing any clothes. It's not a big deal. I suggested from the bench that it is a big deal for a 13-year-old girl. she's in a very vulnerable stage of her development. Well, that case came out the right way. Reminding the members of Congress that there is a First Amendment that guarantees the right to think, speak, and write without Big Brother government telling you what is correct speech. And there was a Fifth Amendment that protected us against self-incrimination. Marvin, this is the one question you told us you might ask us. I was puzzled by it because as I read the Ten Commandments, the first four of them are not about freedom. They're about humans' obligations to God. So thou shalt have no other God before me, no graven images, keep the Sabbath holy, everything, obligations that people owe to the Almighty. But I also mentioned to you that your question comes at just the right season because this is Passover, and the Passover is indeed a celebration of the liberation of a people, and there are many words in the Haggadah that celebrate freedom. So I would pick the Passover service rather than the stern first four commandments as advancing the idea of freedom. I have to disagree with my colleague in that respect.
I'm glad that you can do it. I can't.
First, I don't think that the rest of the world is regarding our legislature at the current moment as a model to be followed. And second, however it was understood in the beginning, yes, the structure of government was to protect our liberties, but there was always the idea of rights. Think of our first great document, the Declaration of Independence. Also, it is true that the great protections that the press now has came rather late. The First Amendment was developed in a serious way around the time of the First World War. It began. Mm-hmm. So the freedom that's enjoyed today, the freedom to speak and to write, was not a big ticket item in the Supreme Court until rather late. In those ancient days, I entered law school in 1956 when women were perhaps 3% of the lawyers in the country, no more. No woman sat on any federal court of appeals. There had been only one in history when Franklin Delano Roosevelt appointed Florence Allen from Ohio to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. When she left, there were none until Shirley Hufstetler in 1968. So in the years when I was going to law school, no women on any federal court of appeals, of course none on the Supreme Court. I had no woman teacher. That was unheard of. What was law school like in the not-so-good old days? Well, my entering class numbered over 500, and of those, 9 were women. How did we feel? Well, we thought all eyes were on us, so we better be prepared, because if we weren't, it would reflect not only on ourselves, but on all women. To see the difference, I will tell you about a colleague of mine at Columbia Law School. Now, many years later, it's the mid-70s, and women are in law school in numbers. And this great professor said, I think it's great that we have so many women students, but I have a certain longing for the way it was. When the class was moving slowly and you needed a crisp right answer, you called on the woman. She was always prepared. She would give you the right answer, and then you could move on. Well, nowadays there's no difference. The women are as unprepared as the men. One final note. The law school that I attended had 2 teaching buildings. Only one of them had a women's bathroom. So if you were in class and you had to leave, well, you might miss some of the professor's pearls. But if you were taking an exam, time-pressured exam, in the building without the bathroom and had to make a mad dash to the other building. But the thing that I marvel at now is that we never complain. That's just the way it was. There was no Title VII. I graduated in 1959. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination on the basis of race, national origin, religion, and sex. But in the 1950s, law firms and some of the finest judges were upfront in saying they wanted no women. They would feel uncomfortable dealing with a woman, or, as I often heard, we hired a woman at this firm once, and she was dreadful. How many men did they hire who didn't work out? So it wasn't easy to get that first job. The first job was all important because if you got it and performed well, then the next job was secure. Well, I had a great professor, some of you may know his name, Gerald Gunther. He was a great constitutional law scholar, and he was in charge of getting judicial clerkships for Columbia Law School students. And I was his special cause. He was determined to get me a federal clerkship. So he recommended me to a judge who always hired his law clerks from Columbia. And he said, my candidate for you this year is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And the judge said, well, I've looked at her resume. She has a 4-year-old daughter. How can I rely on her? And the great professor said, Judge Palmieri, give her a chance. If she doesn't work out, there's a man in her class who will step in and take over for her. That's the carrot. The stick, if you don't give her a chance, I will never recommend another Columbia clerk to you. Now that's how I got my first job, but it was My mother died when she was 47. At the time, I thought that was at least middle-aged. She was one of the smartest people I ever knew. She had 2 messages for me in my growing up years: to be a lady. Don't be distracted by emotions like anger, envy, resentment. These just sap energy and waste time. And the other was to be independent. Yes, she hoped I would meet Prince Charming and live happily ever after, but she stressed the importance of being able to manage on my own. In the beginning of the 70s, it was what I called the closed door era. There were so many things that women couldn't do. There was the familiar stereotype that the woman was the center of home and family life, and the man was the representative of the family outside the home. The effect of that, well, it had many, many effects. One was that women weren't called for jury duty. Now, you might think that was a pure favor to a woman because, given the opportunity not to serve, probably most people would would decline the invitation. But what it says to the woman is you really are not needed in our system of justice. We need the men, but women are expendable. So that effort to change all of the state laws that either exempted women, some of them had an opt-in system, some an opt-out system, but the arrangement said to women, you don't count as full citizens, because if you're a citizen, you have obligations as well as rights. And one of the prime obligations is to participate in the system of justice. So, as part of raising women to full citizenship stature, an effort was made, a successful effort, to see that women were called for jury duty on the same basis as men. Then in the economic sphere, women were considered pin money earners, not the earner who counts. Ramifications of that, one was that if a woman must take a blue-collar worker, she wants to get health insurance for her family at her plant. She is refused that coverage. She's told only a man can get family coverage. Women can cover themselves, but they can't cover their family. Or think of Social Security benefits. If a male wage earner retires or dies, his spouse could get benefits. He as well as his spouse. If a woman wage earner retired or died, her spouse got no benefits. So the effort was to treat people as people and to treat workers as workers, not male workers who are treated as the breadwinner who counts, and female workers who are a lesser breed. Then occupations. There were so many that were off limits to women. Firefighting, policing. Think of how many women were on the bench at the start of the 70s, precious few. So the effort was to change all the laws that differentiated arbitrarily on the basis of gender, so that women would have the opportunity to pursue their talents, whatever those talents might be, and to face no artificial barriers. So the law books in the states and the U.S. Code were changed in the span of 10 years to eliminate the gender-based differentials that once cluttered them. So it was a very heady experience. When I said I was part of an effort to see that change happen. In the Turning Point case before this court, it was a case decided in 1971 called Reed v. Reed. I was representing Sally Reed, and the American Civil Liberties Union was supporting the case. On the cover page of the brief, we put the names of two women, one Dorothy Kenyon, the other Pauli Murray, because those women had been saying exactly the same thing we were saying in the 70s, but they were saying it in the 40s and the 50s, into the 60s, when society was not yet prepared to listen.
In that case, we argued three things. One, that this regulation, if you're pregnant, you're out unless you have an abortion, violated the equal protection principle, because no man was ordered out of service because he had been the partner in the conception. No man was ordered out of service because he was about to become a father. And then we said that the government is impeding without cause a woman's choice whether to bear or not to bear a child, and that was her personal choice, and the interference with it was a violation of her liberty, her freedom to choose, guaranteed by the Due Process Clause. And then finally we said that this is an unnecessary interference with her religious belief.
Could that argument be applied for someone who wished to have the option of an abortion as well? Does it apply both to the decision to not have an abortion as well as to a decision to have an abortion, to terminate the pregnancy?
The argument was it's her right to decide either way, her right to decide whether or not to bear a child.
In this case, any restrictions from her employer to that option or to that right would be constrained under the equal protection argument.
Yes. In this case, it was her choice for childbirth, and the government was inhibiting that choice. It came at the price of remaining in the service. That was, but you asked me about my thinking about equal protection versus individual autonomy, and my answer to you is it's both. This is something central to a woman's life, to her dignity. It's a decision that she must make for herself. And when government controls that decision for her, she is being treated as less than a fully adult human responsible for her own choices. I said on the equality side of it that it is essential to woman's equality with man, that her choice, that she be the decision maker, that her choice be controlling. And that if you impose restraints and disadvantage her, you are disadvantaging her because of her sex.
Late this afternoon, Judiciary Chairman Joseph Biden called the progress of the hearings wonderful. Judge Ginsburg returns tomorrow and Friday, when she and members will go into a unique closed session to discuss any personal allegations against her, a new practice instituted after the Clarence Thomas hearings.
Well, that's, not going to lie, that's pretty moving when you think about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's long legacy and the impact she's had on the Supreme Court and on our country. So that's a kind of a preview of what some of the stuff we're going to be going through tomorrow. Though don't forget, we also have Doug Price back with Following Mitch's Money. And of course, our special guest, Mark Murphy, cartoonist and Kentuckian extraordinaire. So we hope that you all will be joining us again Monday, September 21st, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the next thrilling installment of Moscow Mitch Monday. See you then.